We've added a new toolbar button in this release of RSpec for zooming. Here it is. Let's click on it. And here the zoom window, it's resizable just like every other window in the system. And if I hover my mouse over any one spot, I can use my mouse roller wheel like this to zoom into spots and zoom out again. And I can use the left mouse button to move around horizontally or vertically, to scroll or pan around. The real purpose of this screen is to let you adjust, as I'm doing here, those orange horizontal binning lines. And by doing so, you can see real-time the impact of those adjustments. This lets you squeeze the most amount of information out of your spectrum data from your camera. Okay, let's look at another capability that we've added. Under reference in the past, whenever you wanted to get to any of these options, you had to click that reference button. Well, now we can detach this menu and it will float anywhere we put it. So this is one of those click saving things that once you start using it, you'll really appreciate it because it just helps you avoid having to click the reference button every time you want to get to one of these options. So we've made some changes to some of the features on this menu. Let's start with the edit points. This region here is new and it lets us delete a range of points by specifying a wavelength below which or above which we want to delete things. So we'll turn the measure lines off. We don't need them here. So suppose we want to delete everything up to something in the UV range. So I'll come over here. For points below, I'll just put in the wavelength below which I want to delete everything, 3800 angstroms for example, and click delete. You can see that range is now gone on the profile. Now the undo capability works, so we can click on undo here to bring them back if we want. All right, let's close this down and look at another change, and that's on the Math on 2 series screen. We've added this new field that lets you apply a constant to either the main profile or reference profile. You might use this, for example, when you were normalizing. So let's put the numeric amount in. We're going to adjust by 100. We're going to divide by 100, in fact, and I click calculate. And now we can see that we went from 1600 down to 16 for our maximum. Now you've always been able to move calculation results back to the profile, and now you can move them back to the reference line also. That gives you some additional flexibility that you can use, for example, when you're doing instrument calibration. Now up here under Language, Tools, Language, Choose Language, we can now configure RSpec to run in Dutch. Thanks, Mark, for that translation. Now to show you this next feature, I'm going to make some changes just to open up the binning lines a little bit and move this reference menu out of the way. Now for better Spectra, a lot of you are using the subtract background feature in RSpec, or you're subtracting the background in other software before you bring your image in. Now, due to random noise, it's possible to get negative flux values when you do that, but RSpec in the past didn't display those negative values. Now with these two checkboxes, you can configure the program to show them. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Now let's open up the Appearance screen, and also I'm going to open the Elements screen here. Now in a previous release, we added the capability so that you could double-click on any wavelength here, and the software, instead of your having to type that wavelength and identifier in, would automatically put it both here, of course in the label Details, and display it over on the right on the screen. Now we've made it even faster now, because in the past what you then have to do is select the next label here and then double-click the next element you wanted to add. So for those of you who are adding a lot of elements, that was a fair amount of work. So let's erase, using this new button, both of these labels so that we can walk through the process again using this new capability. We've added a setup button here. And on this setup screen you can configure not only the text that's being automatically applied, but down here this checkbox instructs RSpec to automatically advance to the next label. Watch how fast this goes now. I simply double click, it gets added, but notice the software's advanced to label 2 here. So now I can just double click again and just work my way through, adding all of the labels that I want without having to move anywhere. Now of course we then have to go back and adjust things to be positioned on the screen the way we want, but this makes adding the labels much, much faster for those of you who are adding a lot of labels to your profile graphs. All right, so let's clear up the screen here so that we can show you the next new feature. We'll get rid of this elements list. Now, you've always been able to average the frames in a video, stacking them. But now you can select which frames you want to average. We use this new split video to bitmap capability first. We've selected the input video, and we've also selected an output folder. When I clicked on Convert, the software is now going through and each frame is being converted to a bitmap and saved in that output folder. Now we'll stop it here. We need not go through the entire video for this walkthrough. So now let's take a look at all of those individual frames using this Create Video Preview Image screen. There they all are listed, and I've got a check mark here so that we preview the images real time. So as I click on any frame, it gets loaded on the left of the screen and the profile actually gets showed on the right. We can use these arrow keys to step through also. So the process here is to step through looking at the profile on the right. For example, see how shallow that hydrogen absorption line is there? Let's compare it to the previous frame. And the previous frames is much deeper. Now this is a qualitative evaluation today. What you could do now is select that frame number 6 and turn it off so that it won't be included in the video that we're building. So you'd step through your frames examining them in this manner. And for example, you could also use the Show Focus tool to actually measure the depth of a feature. Once you've deselected those frames that you don't want to include, you'd click on the Create Video button and the software will create a video with just those frames that meet your quality criteria. So here's another great new feature in this release. On this screen for the example we're going to look at, we've already loaded Supernova 2011 FE's spectrum. Now we're going to load a professional grade high resolution spectrum to compare it to. There it is in purple. Now its general shape is different than our red curve because we haven't corrected our red curve for instrument response. But even though that's the case, we can still see that there are absorption lines that line up between the reference and our data. We can use this new Scale Reference toolbar button to make it easier to compare these two curves. As I adjust the trackbar over here, you can see the scale of the reference curve changes. This allows me to rescale it and compare the features as they directly overlap one another, making it easier to compare spectra. I don't know exactly why, but this is my favorite feature in this release. I think it's because of the flexibility and the power it gives the user to examine two different spectra in an intuitive manner. It's also just fun to run that slider up and down and see the screen change. Now there's another nice way to compare two spectra or even examine one. If you hold the Control and the Shift key down and then move your mouse, you'll see this vertical line appear, and that will allow you to see what features align with one another. You can also see down here on the bottom x-axis the angstroms is being updated as we move. Now you can change the color of this line on the appearance screen. Now we've also changed the layout cosmetically of the options screen, adding a second tab. There's nothing different here but cosmetics, but it makes it easier for you to work with it without all the options jammed onto one screen. Now also, as some of you know, RSpec has the capacity to be translated into other languages, and we're always interested in hearing from users who would like to work with us to do that. We've enhanced that capability considerably in this release. Here under Language, the Show Message IDs command now not only shows you the message IDs that you would be translating on a different screen, but also shows you the text associated with that message, which makes it much easier to work with. Let's turn that off. Now there's another really exciting capability here for translators. Under Language, Live Translate. When we turn this on and you're working on a custom language file, if you hold the Control key down and click, you can actually translate the text right in place as I'm doing here. So we've now just changed that button to the French translation. It's that easy, and it works on almost every label on the screen. Here's another example. It doesn't work on the pull-down menus or the menu bar at the top of the screen, but this can really speed up the translation process. So those are all the new features in the RSpec program in this release. I hope you found some that excite you and that you're looking forward to using. It's been a really busy year for us. We've been at a lot of conferences. We were at NEAF near New York City. We've been in California a couple times to the PATS, the OPT conference. And I'd like to thank everybody for your ongoing support. It's been a great year. There are now RSpec users on every continent except Antarctica. So if you know anybody in Antarctica who's doing spectroscopy, have them get in touch with us. There's one other activity I'm involved in that I wanted to tell you about. I'm now giving live presentations over the web. They're called webinars, and I give them to astronomy clubs as a meeting speaker. If you think your club might be interested in this, or you're just curious about what it's all about, there's a demonstration video that you can get to by clicking on the link on your screen. Thanks a lot.